And the Holiday Bowl has concluded in San Diego. Another matchup between the Big Ten and the Pac-12, with the Big Ten winning again. If you look over the last several years, the Big Ten has owned this battle between the two conferences, with Iowa taking the best of USC 49-28, but a much better game than the final score would indicate. And we'll dive into it here with Matt Lowry from Conquest Chronicles here in just a second. You're watching Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, as we do live post game throughout the bowl season. And please check out the instant analysis that we have, and would like to let everyone out there know that we're going to be going live just prior to the first semifinal game between LSU and Oklahoma at the Peach Bowl, 3:30 Eastern time on Saturday. But again, it's USC and Iowa analysis. I'll be checking out the live chat room to pass on questions and comments to Matt and also myself. Matt, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good considering just watching what transpired in the Holiday Bowl for the last quarter and a half. I would say I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah, so it was a game in which we talked about this the last time we got together and previewed the matchup between the Big Ten and the Pac-12 here with Iowa and USC. That I said that flat out that this was one of the two or three games that I wanted to see most outside of the playoffs. I thought that it was going to be a great game, and forget the final score. This was a 28-24 game midway through the third quarter and had all the makings of going down to the wire. And then, bam, that Iowa pass rush put a hurting on Keaton Slovis, who was having a Keaton Slovis kind of game. He came into the game 29 touchdowns and 9 picks, and he was carving up the Iowa defense on occasion when the pass rush wasn't getting to him. But that proved to be his downfall when A.J. Epinesa, who's one of the best defensive ends in the country, got to him. And it was reported as a sprained wrist and elbow, or shoulder and elbow, for Keaton Slovis, and he had to leave the game, and it turned into a Hawkeye rout from there.
Yeah, USC's offense was keeping them in the game. The downfall right now, or the downfall of that game, was just USC's defense just could not get off the field. They could not get Iowa's offense off the field. Iowa was just manhandling them in the trenches. They were moving the ball left and right, scoring, I believe, on every possession up until the until late in the third quarter. But USC's offense, it was generally what kept them in the game for that whole entire game. They were moving the ball, they were scoring, they were doing what we talked about, actually, Mark, or what we mentioned, was that USC can put up points. USC can move the ball. It was the USC defense I didn't think would have issues. I didn't think USC's defense would get manhandled by Iowa's offensive line. Iowa just dominated time of possession, which really hurt USC, because we know USC loves to score quickly and would love to have the ball and put up points at rapid pace. But if you can't get an offense off the field, it's kind of hard. And I think what surprised me was that Iowa Iowa utilized the speed off the edge. They used jet sweeps. They used a lot of stuff, just beating USC with speed. That's something you don't see, especially when we talk about a USC defensive team.
Yeah, so Iowa, I'm tracking the game right here in regards to the play-by-play and the possession-by-possession. If you look at it, um, don't have it right in front of me, but Iowa scored basically the first 5 times they had the ball. They had the one kickoff return from Amir Smith-Marset, who had a tremendous game, just went off. But other than that, it was a 75-yard drive, a 72-yard drive, a 90-yard drive, a 52-yard drive, 4 consecutive scoring drives when the offense had the ball from the opening kickoff on into the third quarter for Iowa. So 5 consecutive times Iowa touched the football. They scored touchdowns to go up 35-24 at that point. Then the USC defense played a little bit better, but Iowa had the lead, knocked out Slovis. It was an entertaining game, and unfortunately, again, it was just disappointing that Slovis couldn't finish the game to see this one all the way through to see if USC could have taken this one down to the end, because Iowa looked like the better team to that point, but not by much. It looked like it was just going to be a great game between just two very, very not elite teams, flawed teams, but really good teams. And as we mentioned, this being the first of the bowl matchups between two ranked teams. And again, through three quarters, it lived up to the billing of two just really good teams matching up.
Yeah, it honestly it did. And you could tell like there wasn't a huge difference between Iowa and USC. Once Slovis got hurt, as you mentioned, I think that was it. That took the sails out of USC, because USC in the third quarter was grabbing momentum. Remember, they had the 55-yard bomb to Amon-Ra St. Brown, which Slovis got clocked on that throw. And then you had the score a couple of plays later, I believe, by Stephen Carr to bring them down by 4. Then you had the onside kick, and it looked like USC was going to finally take the lead and was going to take momentum, and that just never happened. It just never happened from there. Then Slovis got hurt, and that was it. Like that was that from there. Once Slovis got hurt, I mean, we know Matt Fink, what he did against Utah. Everybody brings that up. However, that wasn't the case. We saw Matt Fink we saw the Matt Fink from the Washington game instead of the Matt Fink from the Utah game. So that was something that they never recovered from there.
Yeah, so it's a difficult place to be in. Matt Fink coming off the bench, having to take on an Iowa defense that is it's a top 10 to 15 defense in the country, and I'm not just talking about statistically. It is legitimately one of the 10 to 15 best defenses in the country. As you mentioned off the top, it was a bit surprising that an Iowa offense that consider in 12 games, they're playing 9 of those games against the Big Ten. So it's basically, this statistic is built on playing against the Big Ten and then a game against Iowa State, which would have been their other difficult opponent than an FCS and a MAC team, but the 99th rated offense in the country. So Iowa, despite having Nathan Stanley, who's going to play in the NFL to some degree. He may hold a clipboard, but he's going to make an NFL roster. They've got an NFL tight end. They have NFL offensive linemen. Despite having a lot of pros on that offense, they weren't that productive in terms of yardage this year at 99th in the country. And their total, it's very strange because I ripped off just a few seconds ago the stats from the first 5 scoring drives, one a kickoff return, but the other 4 long drives. They didn't have a whole lot of total yardage in this game. They had the 4 long drives, and then they really just didn't need to do much after that. And their defense kept turning the ball over. So the offense had a short field or didn't have to do anything. And of course, the pick 6. So the offense was very productive on the 4 drives that they needed to score on, and they did exactly that.
Well, let's keep in mind too, Iowa's also played defenses in their 3 losses. They've played defenses that are ranked, I want to say, in the top 50 in the nation.
Oh yeah, easily.
And USC is nowhere close to that. USC is nowhere close to that. But you didn't think USC's offense of all, or not offense, but USC's defense of all teams would give up, I'd say, about maybe 30 something points to Iowa. Granted, I say that because 2 touchdowns did come off of non-offensive scores. One was the pick 6 at the end towards the end of the game, and the other was the kick return by Marset. So I didn't expect USC to give up that many points to Iowa. Offensively, I didn't think Iowa's offense would put up that many points against USC's defense. But at the same time, it doesn't shock me given how USC's defense has been this season.
Yeah, so the other factor in this game that is interesting that goes beyond this particular season in this game was the shots of JT Daniels on the sideline. He has announced that he's at least stated that he's going to stay at USC. He's not going to transfer, but obviously he came into this situation as a 17-year-old, having already passed a lot of his college courses. So he's going to graduate rather early. But it appears as though, based on what he has stated, that he's going to stick around the program. He's going to compete with Slovis this next season based on and certainly I want to get your opinion because you're the guy that watches USC every game and I watch about the 5 biggest games of the year. But JT Daniels' performance was nothing close to what we've seen of Slovis this year. And that just appears to be a difficult assignment for him to take on to try to unseat Slovis as starting quarterback.
It is at this rate, because Slovis has shown what he can do, and especially with him having enough time in this offense. Daniels, I believe, only had spring, fall, and 2 quarters, 1.5 quarters maybe of in this offense. I think it'll be a competition. It's going to be open. You have to open it up, but the biggest question is, how is JT going to look after coming off of a major knee injury? Slovis right now has the upper hand. He has a huge upper hand right now. If JT does get the job, if he win, it's going to have to be one of two ways. He has to outright win it, or Slovis is going to have to outright just take a step back. And I don't see Slovis taking a step back here. This is, and to me, I think Slovis has the upper hand. I know other people will say, well, JT is a 5-star guy. JT is a modern day guy. JT, that JT is going to guarantee, it's guaranteed that JT has this job. However, you can't deny what Slovis has done in this offense. You can't deny what Slovis has done this season as a true freshman. And you can't deny that he's going to have the upper hand with a lot of these guys on offense coming back. They're going to have a lot of these guys coming back on offense. So it's just basically you have to take a pick. What's going to give you a better chance? I think Slovis at this point really gives USC a better chance at winning and succeeding moving forward.
So I'm amused, Matt, at the folks in the live stream, Eli in particular, who want me to take on basketball now that the USC football season is over, that want me to take on college basketball. I can tell you right now, I appreciate the sentiment there, Eli, but that's not going to happen. And later in the chat, he mentioned that what's there to talk about in the off season. And I just rattled off to somebody the other day who asked me the same thing. Once college football season's over, what's there to talk about? And I said, you've got to be kidding me. We actually have more to talk about in the off season with the transfer portal, with recruiting, with ranking positions and, reviewing the previous season and previewing the next season and going through schedules and all this other stuff. Believe me, there's more than enough to talk about. We got Matt Lowry on the line from Conquest Chronicles breaking down USC football as the Trojans go down to the Hawkeyes 49-24. So this is going to mean that USC at 8-5, which was ranked at 22nd in the college football playoff rankings, most assuredly, especially losing by 20 some points, is not going to stay in the final top 25. I don't know what that means to most people. It used to mean something. I don't know that in this college football playoff era, the rankings mean a whole lot at the end of the season to a lot of people based on what I hear. I think it means something to me. But USC at 8-5 is not going to be, you would think, in the final rankings after this loss. So Clay Helton, does the evaluation by you change at all in regards to whether he should have been kept? We had this conversation last week or the week before, Matt, and it appeared as though the fan base was mostly against him being retained. You weren't necessarily totally on board, it seemed, with keeping him based on what the expectations are for USC football and him not showing that he can win championships.
No, I honestly was not on board at all with him coming back. And I mentioned it because based off of whatever the standards that we were making for USC. If the standard is to compete for the Pac-12 championship, to make the college football playoffs and compete for a Rose Bowl at the minimum, then Clay Helton is not that guy. Tonight just reaffirmed everybody that Clay Helton's obviously not the guy. And I mentioned that it was more of spur of the moment because the wins against UCLA, Arizona State, and Cal, 3 teams who USC is supposed to beat. A lot of the fan base were beside themselves when they decided to retain them, and for good reason. I mean, I understand it. This just basically all USC fans right now just they're looking at Mike Bowen and Carol Fulton. They're going, "We told you so." That's really what it is. It's more of just a "we told you so." We told you that this was gonna happen. We knew this was gonna happen. And right now, everybody is just basically going, we knew this was gonna happen. We told you this was gonna happen if you keep Clay Helton. Nothing was going to change. Recruiting showed that, and we talked about that not that long ago. Now this game shows it. Now, will it mean? I mean, at this game, it comes at the expense of, at this rate, Pendergast and Baxter. I think at this rate they're gone. But then again, I said Helton was gone too, and you saw how that played out. But I think at this rate, I don't think changing coordinators will also help. Changing defensive coordinators and special team coordinator, I don't think that'll really help at this rate, because at the end of the day, it boils down to Clay Helton, and Clay Helton has to make some changes to his style of coaching, and he has to make a lot of changes to his philosophy and recruiting, and to a lot of stuff. There's a lot of things that needs to be changed up with Helton and with USC. And until USC decides they're going to commit to those changes, I don't think anybody's going to be really happy with keeping Helton. And right now, going into the 2020 season, if you want to look at it with this game, USC is probably going to be in the same position as they were this year. It's going to be the same position, unfortunately, where you're going to wonder, is Helton gone? Is Helton staying? Recruits they're not going to want to commit because they don't know what's going on, and it's going to be the same thing.
I got to think that recruiting is a difficult business. It's a grind. It's difficult. The competition is fierce. But at USC, my goodness, in that division, Clay Helton should be able to do much better than he's done this particular recruiting season. And I'll give him a bit of a break considering his job was hanging by a thread. And I think that really hurt him this particular recruiting season, because his recruiting classes prior to this were really good. Number 20 last season and in the top 5 the previous 2 seasons. So we'll see if he's able to recover next recruiting cycle and recruit as well as you would think you can at USC. You've got everything going for you in regards to status, brand, facilities,
but at the but at the end of the day, a lot of people say USC recruits itself. I think Matt Leinart hit the nail on the head during the pregame of the Holiday Bowl, was that USC no longer recruits itself because of the situation that they're in. And it's not all Clay Helton. Now, yes, we point to Clay Helton because he's the head coach. It's not all Clay Helton. It falls on administration and the AD. Mind you, the athletic director took, I don't know how long to say, hey, Helton's our guy, or hey, we're going to let Helton go. That decision should have been made right after the Pac-12 championship game was, the matchup was set. That should have been a decision that should have been made right after that. But it just shows there's a number of things wrong with USC. I don't think USC really recruits itself anymore. Like Leinart was saying, it's just there's so many things that's going on. I think the people there, and especially with Helton, they set the bar so low for USC that it's like they might as well have mid-major expectations. They might as well have it feels like they have the same expectations as a Western Kentucky or a lower end Power 5 team, and that's not USC. That's not USC, but that's the expectation. That's the standard that I feel like they're setting right now.
Yeah, I wouldn't dip it quite as deep as Western Kentucky, but I certainly get the point, Matt, that it seems to be suddenly an Arizona State, a Utah, a Washington State. Hey, if we win 8 or 9 games, we're comfortable with that. And that certainly shouldn't be what USC is all about, especially in that division, with the status and the current situation at UCLA in particular. It's just a division that they should be owning. And Utah has done a tremendous job with Kyle Whittingham in play, but they have a recruiting disadvantage based on where they're located and not having the status that they do. But he just knows the type of players that he wants, and obviously has a pipeline to certain areas of the country in which he's able to bring in just tremendous line play in particular. And then he goes the JUCO route to bring in some of the best, some of the better skill position people. But that's where we stand with USC football right now, getting to the Holiday Bowl. They did go 7-2 in the Pac-12. This was still probably the third or fourth best team in the Pac-12 this year. But to see their recruiting class in the 70s and 80s is alarming, because that's probably going to hold to National Signing Day, even though they can pick up a couple guys. Most of the recruits have been signed 75 to 80%. So it's going to be a rough go in terms of this particular recruiting cycle. But after, again, pulling in a top 20 class after a couple of top 5 classes, Clay Helton showed, at least for those 3 years, that he can recruit.
Yeah, he showed that he can recruit before this. It's just right now, I think, in my opinion, USC situation that they're in with the uncertainty and them not doing a whole lot in the Pac-12, especially in a division you said that they should be owning right now. But also, and it was mentioned too, USC still has some 4 and 5-star guys on this roster, and they're tallying off what I want to say they have about 8 they have 8 wins this season. Then you have 5 the previous season. I mean, it boils down to player development, and USC has lacked in the player development for quite some time. I think this was brought up. This was a concern that was brought up after the Ohio State game, where after the Ohio State game, people were wondering, how are you developing these players? Because there's no way a team with Sam Darnold, and mind you, Sam Darnold was taken, I believe, 4th in the NFL draft. A lot of people were wondering, how is Sam Darnold, who was a Heisman contender who was a Heisman contender at the beginning of the season, how is he underperforming? And a lot of people were looking at it, was like, what is going on with player development? What's wrong with player development right now? Because you're getting beat by Notre Dame and Ohio State, who are contenders for the playoffs. And you're and not even getting beat, but getting blown out in these games. USC has lacked in the player development cycle for close to 3 years, which is something.
Yeah, that particular game in the Cotton Bowl was a bit alarming because Ohio State was supposed to win the game. They were a 7 to 10 point favorite, but most of us expected that to be a shootout because USC had arguably the best wide receiver core in the country. They had a future NFL quarterback who's a legitimate starting quarterback right now in the NFL. They had Ronald Jones, who was a top 5 to 10 running back in the nation. And the only touchdown they scored in that game is because Ohio State muffed a punt at its own 10 or 15-yard line. Otherwise, they couldn't score.
Yeah, and the lack of urgency in that game too. And it wasn't like USC's defense was bad either. USC they have guys who are starting in the NFL right now. They had Uchenna Nwosu, who's a starter for the LA Chargers. I almost called them San Diego Chargers, but for the LA Chargers. So it's crazy. If that's one thing that should have sent red flags out to everybody about player development under Clay Helton, it was that that Cotton Bowl game. And then the previous, and then the following season, the 5-7 season, where USC went 5-7, and you're like, how is USC going 5-7 with a losing record? And you thought that was it for Clay Helton. Again, 8-5, 8-4, 8-5 is something that you shouldn't be aiming for. And I felt the administration, I felt Mike Bowen just fell prisoner to the moment of winning those games against UCLA, against Cal, and against Arizona State. He fell prisoner of the moment of USC finishing strong, and reality set in. Reality kicked in against Iowa. Again, wasn't a bad game against Iowa tonight, but you can tell defense was just getting bullied. Just things weren't going right, and then Slovis getting hurt. That was that. But at the same time, there's no way that USC should be getting beat by Iowa like that. There's no way that should be happening. A lot of people will bring up Slovis' injury. That did play a huge hand in it. But at the same time, USC had opportunities to take this game and not be in this position. It started with your defense getting pushed, bullied down the field against Iowa. And that was something where it was a concern of mine. I matter of fact, I said that in my matchups to watch for this game was, how is USC's defense going to play? How are they going to handle the Iowa running game? And that it showed tonight.
Yeah, so what's interesting about USC, and it was mentioned there in the chat, trying to find it here. Anyway, Reggie Bush actually got into the mix. Apparently, I didn't see the halftime show, but just talking about USC not recruiting as well as it should, where it stands in the recruiting rankings, and as you mentioned, not recruiting itself, not being able to recruit as it has in the past, just based on name only. Yeah, so we've got a situation, if I'm not mistaken, that game number one's against that Alabama team.
Yep. They play Alabama, first game of the season, and Arlington again. Very eerie right now. And I will say this is very eerie because the end of the 2015 season ended with a Holiday Bowl loss to Wisconsin, followed by Alabama to start the season, and we saw how that game went. USC loses Holiday Bowl after Helton's retained. Most likely they're going to get rid of their defensive coordinator again. Going in against Alabama again, we saw how that season shaped up. USC went to the Rose Bowl, won the Rose Bowl. I'm not saying the same thing will happen next season, but it's an eerie feeling because it's very similar. However, Alabama most likely will be breaking in a new quarterback, which we all pretty much know it's going to be it's going to be Bryce Young, former USC commit. If there's a time, if there's a thing, I don't think the same thing's going to happen with USC and Alabama in 2016, in that 2016 game. I don't think the same thing will happen. However, I do think USC will compete. I think we could see a similar result in that Alabama game. I will say that. I think we could see a very similar result in that game.
So to be fair about the quarterback situation tonight with Slovis getting knocked out, and it was, I believe, a 28-24 game. I think the play that knocked him out led to the Iowa touchdown that made it 35-24. So it was a 28-24 game. It was a game in which Iowa looked, again, I think they looked like slightly the better team, not by much. It was a very competitive game. USC was a bit on a roll, having scored the one previous drive. They had the onside kick that proved to be effective in maintaining momentum, getting the ball back. I think you got to take a balanced approach in evaluating a team that loses its starting quarterback. On one hand, yes, there is typically a fairly significant drop off between the starting quarterback and the backup quarterback, and that has to be taken into consideration. On the other hand, USC's supposed to be an elite program. They're not an elite team right now. We know that. That's obvious. They lost 5 games, but they're a good team. They're a decent team. They're a roughly top 25 team in the nation. And your Ohio States, your Alabamas, your Clemsons, if they lose their starting quarterback, they don't fall apart. They bring in the next guy. He's not as quite as dynamic. He's not quite the elite talent as the first guy, but he's capable. He's more than capable. He's a really good player. He'll deliver the throws, make the right decisions, probably is athletic, go down the rung of the best teams in the country. If they lose their starting quarterback, they can still play with anybody in the country with a backup quarterback. So that has to be taken into consideration in both regards, that there's going to be a downgrade in play if you lose your starting quarterback. But the best teams, and if USC's held to that standard, they can play without. Alabama's going to be playing Michigan in a bowl game without its starting quarterback. They played Auburn and put up 45 points on a really good Auburn defense without its starting quarterback. Ohio State won a national championship 5 years ago with a third string quarterback. It can be done, and it's done by the better teams in the country. USC is not one of those teams. So we saw what happened when they lost their starting quarterback, which is the same thing that would happen to most teams losing its starting quarterback.
I agree to that. And if we want to take another look at it too, Ohio State lost two straight quarterbacks. It was down to their third string one year, and I think won the national championship with
Yeah,
a
that's
third
what I
string.
just mentioned. In 2014,
Okay.
they lost their first 2 quarterbacks and had a third stringer, Cardell Jones, win the national championship. Yep.
Yeah. So if you're going to be an elite program, you have to develop players. You have to develop players, which goes from the starters to the backups, all that stuff, which means somebody has to be ready to step in at all times. And it looked like Slovis was just not ready to step in. Again, I mentioned the Utah game where he basically lived off of the deep ball and was like, all right, Michael Pittman, go get it. And it worked, you know. And the same thing didn't happen against Washington. We saw how that game went with Washington. I just think USC just lacks in the player development point, and if they want to be an elite team, it has to start there. We can even, I know we mentioned backup quarterbacks. I know you mentioned Alabama. Well, once upon a time, USC used to be able to do this, where they put a backup quarterback in for an injured guy, and you had nothing to worry about. John David Booty goes down in a Stanford game, and that loss to Stanford. Mark Sanchez steps up. Look at what he does. Mind you, they lose to Oregon, but it wasn't like they got blown out by Oregon in that game. They almost came back and won that game against Oregon. I just think USC is far from being that elite program that everybody wants them to be at this point. They're very far from it. Can it happen under Helton? I don't think so, unless Helton changes up some thinking in his style. But that's the biggest thing. I don't think Helton by any means could get USC back to that standard. Next season, I think they have the potential. I will say this: I think they have the potential to be to win the Pac-12 South and to win the Pac-12. There's the potential there because of who they bring back, because of the schedule might shape up kind of favorably. I mean, yeah, they play Washington, they go to Oregon, they get Notre Dame, and they play Alabama. But I mentioned this on Conquest Chronicles. There's, I think, 5 or 6 teams on that schedule that's going to be breaking in new quarterbacks at that time. Now, when USC plays them, that's a different story
Yeah, let's check this out
at
because you
that
mentioned.
point. So that kind of favor that goes in.
Go ahead, Matt. You broke up,
Oh,
so I thought
go
you
ahead.
stopped talking, but go right ahead and finish your thought.
Yeah, I was just saying all these teams that on USC's schedule break in new quarterbacks. USC is going to have a quarterback that's ready to go. That's already has the offense under him and everything. They're going to have a defense who's basically just about everybody returns except I think 2 starters, and most of the guys on defense have seen playing time. So they're going to return people. But again, it boils down to Clay Helton and to player development. It's going to boil down to that.
So, Matt, you bring up the 2020 schedule, and the Pac-12 again not doing a lot of favors for USC, and USC not doing favors for itself. But I've got to credit USC football for doing this. Most Power Five teams would say, you know what, we've got a rivalry game with Notre Dame, and they're almost always a top 10 to 12 team in the nation. We're good with that. We're going to schedule our FCS game and our group of 5 and get 2 wins and then take our chances against Notre Dame. But USC tacks it on with a Alabama game. This season, it was tacked on with the BYU game. In previous seasons, it's been Alabama just a few years ago. It's been other really good Power 5 teams in addition to Notre Dame. So who plays Notre Dame and Alabama in the same season? Well, I guess Duke did this year, actually, but it rarely happens. And so I've got to credit USC with that, having only played 3 non-conference games, playing a 9-game conference schedule, and scheduling 2 massive heavyweights. They are holding themselves to a certain standard in terms of a schedule, saying this is the kind of schedule we want to play to show who we are. I don't know if it's being held up on the other end of the bargain in regards to the coaching situation, but then the Pac-12 um, has given USC the 3 games in the North, as you mentioned, from Stanford, which was down this year at 4-8, but typically one of the better teams, obviously, in the conference. We'll see what the Cardinal has for us next year. But Washington, under a new head coach, and Oregon, which was the best team in the Pac-12 this year. So they get what arguably could be the 3 best teams in the North Division. So they get no light touches out of the North, have to deal with the South. And of course, it's a trip to Utah this year. So they've got to deal with the Utes on the road, a very difficult place to play. So this is looking like one of the 5 to 10 most difficult schedules in the country.
It does look like it. I do think Stanford. I don't think Stanford will be Stanford as we know, because Stanford right now has 11 guys in the transfer portal right now. So that remains to be seen what goes on with Stanford. Uh, Washington's breaking in again. Will break in a new quarterback with Easton declaring for the NFL draft. Again, but they're going to be getting a new offensive coordinator, and whatever Jimmy Lake is looking for in an offensive coordinator, that's going to be something that a lot of people want to see. Oregon, they're going to be honestly, I think they're going to be hands down the favorite in the Pac-12. Yes, they're going to have a new quarterback, but they got a lot of talent, and that defense is only getting better. Their defense is only getting better. Although they're going to have a new offensive coordinator with the Royal going to UNLV, taking the head coaching job there. It's going to be tough again, as mentioned. It's going to be tough, but once again, the potential with who USC brings back, I think USC has the potential to win the South, and B, to win the Pac-12 championship. It's there. I mean, yes, we can mention coaching all day, but if you want to go off of what USC has coming back especially with Graham Harrell coming back. USC has a lot of potential there. I just think it depends on what they do with their defensive coordinator too, because I think they're going to make a change there. Who they bring in is going to be another story, though.
All right, we got Matt Lowry on the line from Conquest Chronicles talking USC football after the Trojans go down. A very entertaining game for close to 3/4 against Iowa. Keaton Slovis goes down, and so do USC's chances from there, losing 49-24 to the Hawkeyes, who finish at 10-3. USC at 8-5, probably bounce from the final top 25. Of course, it's Clay Helton's team. He's been retained. He's got a low-ranked recruiting class and a very difficult schedule to deal with next year with Alabama and Notre Dame, and the three toughest teams most likely out of the Pac-12 North Division, as we discuss right here. All right, Matt, we appreciate you stopping by. I called Matt and contacted him just minutes left in the game just to say, hey, you want to jump on here and talk some USC football and give us some perspective. So Matt does a tremendous job, and I just greatly appreciate you responding to my direct message there very late in the game and giving us some time here.
Oh, no problem. I'm more than happy to always jump on, talk USC football. It's enjoyable to talk USC football. I know a lot of people may not agree with with some of my stances, but sometimes you gotta take a step back and look at things as a whole and see how all this plays out. But I honestly do enjoy coming on talking USC football. Thanks for having me on, Mark.
As always, Matt, thank you so much for providing your analysis. USC, win or lose, is certainly a team that we need to cover here to maintain our status as the voice of college football, Matt. So we appreciate it. All the best there at Conquest Chronicles. And please, again, I encourage you to join Matt and the rest of the staff there at SB Nation covering USC athletics. Matt, you have a great New Year's, and we will catch up with you soon to talk more recruiting as we get toward the National Signing Day in February and wrap up more concerning USC football.
Sounds good, and you have a happy New Year too, Mark.
All right. I will stay on the line if anybody wants to call in at 860-325-3687. That's the phone line at 860-325-3687. And I will post the number as soon as I can find it. And we'll take some calls with Big College Football Day. Involving, let's see, the Big Ten hit the field for the first time today with Michigan State over Wake Forest. And, of course, the game that we are talking about right here with Iowa over USC. Hey, it's MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mario DeAndre, how you doing?
I am doing great. I am going to be responding to someone here in just a second. So hang on, hang the phone. Bear with me here. Oh, we've got multiple things going on here. Hang on. Got some phone issues. Oh. I got somebody that can just will not. Hang on. Oh, my word. Hang on, DeAndre. Oh, every time it. Ugh. Hang on. Okay, DeAndre, go to it.
I was
Sorry about that.
no, it's all good, Mark. I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
And it's about a college football conference. And I know everybody says SEC in the Big Ten order to best.
Yes.
Which, all jokes aside, probably true. But I was listening to somebody talk tonight, and they were saying maybe we don't need to say the SEC is the best. maybe we need to say the South region is the best football area, and maybe ACC fans wouldn't get so offended because they were talking about how the last 13 out of 14 champions have been in the South, and they were just talking about that. I just wanted to get your what was your thoughts on that? Because I think Florida State when it was 2013.
Yes.
I just wanted to see what your thoughts were about that.
Okay. Let me give you my thoughts in 2 seconds here. Oh,
Okay.
My phone's giving me all sorts of issues because somebody's contacting me that I need to get back to, but I'm trying to message them, and so I can continue here, and it keeps kicking me out.
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay, DeAndre, you got my full attention now. Here we go. So both are true. Both are true. Yes, there is no question that the best football players in the high school ranks are in the South, in addition to Texas and California. So the three best states for producing high school football talent are Texas, California, and Florida. They produce 40% of the top 300 players in the nation. Those three states. And then if Texas, California, and Florida produce 40% of the top 300 college football players, high school football players going into college.
What I asked you, though, you wouldn't consider Southeast Texas, where most of the talent come from, in Dallas, the South?
I don't really consider that the South. When somebody says the South, I think Southeast. I think of Texas as the Southwest. Now, we could have an argument for days about where Texas geographically is. I think of Texas on over, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Oklahoma. I think of that as the Southwest. I think of the Southeast as traditionally Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee. That's the Southeast. So the point I'm making is that what's impressive about the South beyond Florida, because Florida is a highly populated state, is that Georgia is now a highly populated state, but traditionally has not been that highly populated. But Atlanta has obviously just exploded in population in the last 20 years or 25 years. But South Carolina doesn't have a large population. Mississippi, Alabama do not have large populations, nor does Louisiana. Per capita, they produce ridiculous numbers of great high school football players. So, for example, a Mississippi or an Alabama or Louisiana produce roughly the same caliber of high school football players as Ohio does. But Ohio has like 2 to 3 times the population of those states. So it's amazing the amount of high school football talent that those states produce. This is a little bit off the beaten path, but it's just interesting to note that Mississippi produced arguably the greatest quarterback of all time in Brett Favre, arguably the greatest wide receiver of all time in Jerry Rice, and arguably the greatest running back of all time in Walter Payton, all came from Mississippi. So it's amazing the South producing, but for some reason, and when I rail on the ACC, I am doing that from, and you respect this, I believe, I do this from a neutral standpoint. So, for example, in 2016, I was giving all sorts of respect and applause to the ACC because I thought that the SEC was still a better conference, but I thought the ACC performed better on the field throughout the season in its non-conference games, and certainly in the bowl season than the SEC did. And I said the ACC has performed better than every conference in America in 2016. But that's when Louisville was still good and Florida State was still good. And of course, Clemson was the best team in the country that year. And they went 10-3 in postseason play. But for whatever reason since then, and it's been largely due to Florida State and Miami's demise, the ACC has fallen on hard times. We had the conversation, DeAndre, and it was a good one a few months ago, that even though I felt as though the ACC was the worst conference, and I still do, there's a lot of hope for the ACC. It shouldn't stay like this. They're in the right region of the country, and the recruiting is still really good. I think it's going to turn around for the conference. I don't think they're going to stay like this. I think that better days are headed ahead for the ACC.
Yep. And I'm going to let you go after this one, and I was trying to explain to Pittsburgh and Pete this too, and I don't have the numbers like you do and stuff like that, but if you compare the ACC compared to the Southeast Conference and the Big Ten, and I'm not calling nobody dumb or anything like that, but the ACC got what Duke, Wake Forest, Georgia Tech. I had a cousin named Virgil Johnson who played football. He went there. He was a criminal justice major. He said, "I got to take calculus." In Boston College and UVA. And UVA is known for the academics. They ain't going to get Carolina credit because Carolina got caught cheating. But those are really hard academic schools. And people say, well, Kyrie Irving thinks the world is flat and he went to Duke. But Kyrie only had to stay eligible for one semester. You had to find people to go to Wake Forest, Duke, Boston College, UVA, and Georgia Tech that could stay eligible for 3 years, not just for a half a semester. Not saying like Vanderbilt is the only school I could think of like that in the Southeast Conference. Northwestern and Big Ten. I know the Pac-10 is a little bit different too with UCLA, USC, and California, Berkeley, but you got to find players like that. And I said maybe that's one of the reasons why you see that in the ACC, because at certain times you don't get abundance of talent at that school who have been redshirted up and developed like at Duke and Wake Forest or Boston College. I was thinking about that one day, and I was just wondering what you thought about that.
I want to say that I don't give opinions on here if I don't feel like I'm fully capable to give that opinion. So I'm not going to pretend to know the academic landscape of the country and these particular conferences. But I will let you know what I do know. And there's certainly no question that Duke is a first-rate school. So is Virginia. So is Wake Forest. North Carolina is right there. I don't have the rankings for public schools at the top of my head, but their academic reputations are solid and beyond solid at the very highest level, especially when it comes to Duke. But those other schools are as well. In the Big Ten, you mentioned Northwestern, and the Big Ten has very high academic standards, and that's one of the reasons why some schools have not been allowed to join the Big Ten, or the Big Ten is not considered the likes of West Virginia or Louisville to join the Big Ten, and forced Nebraska to gain certain accreditations to join the Big Ten. Northwestern's a great school.
Yeah.
Michigan's a great school. Penn State's a great school. Even Ohio State's academic standards have risen considerably in the last 10 or 15 years to where it's a top 40 school in the country. The SEC, I really can't speak to in terms of the academics, aside from Vanderbilt's obviously a tremendous school.
Right. But I'm just saying, just food for thought when I hear it, because I say, well, if you go around and look at it, and the only reason why I can say I know a little bit about it, because my cousin, she's at Pitt University, and she went there, and she could have went to Boston College, she could have went to any school for track. And a good friend of mine, Marty Jarman, he's he's the athletic director at Pitt. Not at Pitt, at Boston College. And I hear about the academics that we talk about, and there is a big difference between certain schools, like Wake Forest. Wake Forest is, I think, is the smallest, what we call it, the Division I, bowl division,
yes,
whatever we call it, but it's the smallest in the country.
Yes.
And their academics is just as good as Vanderbilt or Duke. So they have to recruit a different type of player. I'm not calling these school dumb or anything. I'm just saying, it just seems like there's more in the ACC compared to the other conferences. I mean, even Michigan State, who's in the Big Ten, they probably have to recruit similar to what Wake Forest have to recruit, or Wisconsin, where they have to say, hey, yeah, we can't get the best athlete to come up here because of the cold, but we can get some guys for redshirt them and, and develop them over the years, but they still going to get more 4 or 5 stars than Wake Forest is.
And that's why it amazes me. And that's why it amazes me when a Northwestern can succeed to the level that it does, or that Boston College can succeed to the level that it does for a different reason. It's a high academic standard there at Boston College, but also they're in a place geographically in the country where they don't have many football players around. So to be able to compete is pretty impressive.
I was just looking at that, and it was just something I wanted to ask you about. I meant to ask you tonight, but about that because that's what I get when people talk about recruiting and stuff around here. Because I got a lot of, like I said, my cousin, she went to the University of Pitt. She goes to the University of Pitt, and she talks about that all the time. How you had to have good grades. And my daughter, she's a very good basketball player, and she's hoping to go to school one day for on a basketball scholarship. But I said, well, your grades got to be right too, not just being a good athlete.
All right, DeAndre. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So I'll answer a couple of these questions, and I appreciate the super chat contribution from Justin Firm. So Justin, we appreciate it as always, and you know that I certainly respect your support of the channel. Thank you so much. It's people like you that keep us going. I've got another call coming in. I'm not going to take too many more calls because I'm going to get off here in the next couple minutes. All right, let's see who's coming in. This is going to be a fairly brief one. Oh, they decided to hang up. Okay, Justin, my thought right here is obviously I have no idea. I don't know Urban Meyer in regards to, I don't know what's going on between his ears, but I got to think that Urban Meyer's a football coach, and the headaches that he would take on as athletic director at Ohio State, I think he wants no part of that. He wants to be a head football coach, and if his health is preventing him from doing that, that's killing him psychologically in terms of wanting to be a football coach. But I can't imagine. He has given me no indication, Urban Meyer, that he wants to be an AD of a major school, even Ohio State. MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's McGee Sports 4. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. What's up, man?
Hey, sorry for hanging up there. I accidentally pressed the hang up button when trying to hit the screen right. So that was me accidentally hanging up. I'm sorry. But I just want to give my 2 cents real quick on this Holiday Bowl. And congrats to Iowa. I picked them to win the Holiday Bowl. They're 10-3. Kirk Ferentz is an excellent head coach. Gets the best out of the talent. I'm very happy for that group of seniors, especially Nick Stanley, the quarterback. But I want to focus more on USC, and I really like what Reggie Bush said. Reggie Bush, after the Holiday Bowl, since the game was on FS1, absolutely ripped into USC, and I applaud him for it. USC is a joke right now. They are pathetic as far as I'm concerned. How are you? You're in the state of California, and you're a USC. How do you have the 80th recruiting class in the country? That is beyond pitiful. Clay Helton should be fired just alone for that, as far as I'm concerned. Now, granted, Slovis did get injured, and give USC credit. They kind of came back in the game 28-24 before Iowa basically ran them out the building. But all I'm going to say is USC is a disgrace to college football. They call them a blue blood program. To me, the whole blue blood program argument is a bunch of, it's just a migraine more than anything. But USC and Miami are disgraces right now to college football. Those are 2 programs. I mean, you're USC, you're in the Pac-12. To me, the only team better than you really is Oregon. USC could be the second best team in the Pac-12, and they're not going to be anywhere close to that of Clay Helton. They need to fire Clay Helton today and get Urban Meyer to coach that team. That's what needs to happen.
You're completely right, McD, but that train has already left the station. We already know what's happened there. They've already decided to retain Clay Helton, so they've kept him. I don't think that a recruiting class should determine a coach's fate. If Bill Snyder recruited classes that ranked 75th in the nation and continued to win 8 and 9 and 10 and 11 games every year. But if you're able to do that, now that's almost impossible to do, but he was able to do it. So if you're able to do it on the field, that's all that matters are the results on the field. Now that's an indication that things aren't going well at USC. So I get your point, but until it transpires on the field, he shouldn't be fired for a bad recruiting class.
Well, Mark, I'm going to rebut your point right there. You want to know the difference between Bill Snyder and Clay Helton? The school they're at.
Well, sure.
Kansas State,
absolutely,
versus USC. I mean, USC, in my opinion, I forget the word I was going to use. The standard there is championships. There every year, Pac-12 championships. Now, granted, I do think Oregon's a better team than them right now, both talent-wise and coaching-wise. But USC should be winning the South in a 10-year stretch, 8 out of 10 years. Now, I get it. Utah is good right now, and they did beat Utah this year, so give them credit. But there is no way that USC should have the 80th recruiting class. And the thing, and I agree, a recruiting class shouldn't get you fired in most scenarios, but at certain schools like USC, Miami, these so-called blue blood programs, you're turning out 80th recruiting classes, I think that's worthy to be fired alone, in my opinion. But that's just my 2 cents. We have the playoff games tomorrow, Mark. I'm sure I'll be seeing videos of you recapping that in the whole 9 yards. Thanks for taking my call, Mark, and go Terps.
Thanks, McD. So the point I'm making here is that, yes, if I am the athletic director at USC or any school that should be competing for championships, and my coach brings in the 75th rated recruiting class in the country, am I going to be alarmed? Yes, I'm going to be alarmed, concerned. But if he goes out there and wins 12 games, then that's all that matters are the results on the field. Now, that's an indication that things aren't going well, but if he's able to belie that ranking by going out and winning games, then that's all that matters. I would have to wait and see the results. If a coach of mine, as a guy who's running the show, brought in the 75th rated class in the country, I wouldn't just fire him based on that. I would then have to see the results on the field play out, if that makes sense, and it should. All right. We appreciate it. I'll be back tomorrow prior to the college football playoffs, 3:30 Eastern time for a quick show just prior to the LSU-Oklahoma kickoff. And I hope to have guests representing both LSU and Oklahoma right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Thank you so much for the super chat contribution, Justin, and also JT. We will see everyone later. If you have any comments or questions that you left in the super chat or in the chat room tonight and you would like them those to be responded to, please just copy and paste them and leave them in the comment section to any of the videos, and we will see you very soon.